channel that could provide different. So Russian authorities censored Russian information inside Russia and cut off Russia from any other channel that would tell differently. So Vladimir Putin justified his so-called military operation by trying to save people of Donbass. But in fact, what he does, he is just making mass murders in Ukraine, mostly in eastern and southern parts of Ukraine that actually have Russian-speaking inhabitants. And his operation has reached out around 20 regions of 25 Ukrainian regions already. So almost every Ukrainian region has been attacked. The most suffering parts, as I have mentioned, is east and south, but also north, and he tries to go to Kiev. Western and Ukrainian intelligence were saying that his major goal was to get Kiev, the capital of Ukraine, in 48 hours. And it is obvious for us that Vladimir Putin has underestimated Ukraine. He has so much disrespect towards many countries, and especially to the post-Soviet space, that he even doesn't consider that we can have a will and we can have strength to defend our country. But he doesn't understand that Ukraine is a value for us. And the recent polling, which says that 95% that left Ukraine want to come back home, is the largest largest proof that Ukrainians appreciate Ukraine. Ukrainians want to live here because this is our home, our family. You know, it's something that we created, and that's something that we want to make the land of prosperity here. But these pictures, there are like enormously a lot of pictures of sufferings of people. Right now, we cannot count how many people died. Russia has air superiority, so they bomb and they shell, and mostly they bomb from the sky, of course. There are cities that just have been smashed from the face of the earth, and it's exactly what he was doing in Syria. The Russian army doesn't allow people to go out, and Russian army doesn't allow any humanitarian aid in. And there are places where, like cities, where there is no any place, like Mariupol, for instance. There is no any building in Mariupol, the city of 400,000 people that would survive there. And the most outrageous examples like, for instance, the bombing of a drama theater in Mariupol. There were big letters with the word children near this theater so that every plane could see it from above. And there was a big shelter in the theater where people were hiding, and they still bombed it so hard that 300 people died. Well, we were still, you know, if it's possible to say, if it's not the cynical to say, we were glad to hear that over 1,000 survived, which was kind of impossible to understand. But 300 people died there, and they definitely saw the word "дети" in Russian, which was called children, and this was just a drama theater. So this was very outrageous. The other example in Mariupol was when they just bombed a maternity hospital, and not many people died, but almost everyone suffered, and pregnant women died there too. And this shows that Russian army just targeting civilian infrastructure. Up to now, there are hundreds of hospitals and hundreds of schools that he targeted all around Ukraine. But it's also about residential houses. It's about different types of infrastructure, though he tells that he is targeting only military objects. They literally started from military objects, but went to civilian infrastructure immediately. My mother is a pediatrician, and she stays now in Kherson region. It's in the south, and it's the only region that borders Crimea that Putin annexed 8 years ago. And when in the morning she called me on 24th of February, that was so hard to imagine that it's happening in our country. And she said that she was going to work, And I wondered if it was a correct thing to do, actually, to go to work when the war started in the country. And then I thought, okay, she works in the hospital. Probably hospital is more secure place for her to stay, right? But it happened that they are targeting hospitals as one of their major goals, as exactly they were doing in Syria. Her hospital survived right now. It's not that destroyed region right now, for the reason that this is the only region that Russia occupied. Yes, there was shelling and bombing, and there is civilian infrastructure damaged, but mostly they are not shelled in the city center, in the central city. But they have food shortages. Like my father wakes up at 6 a.m. and he stands in the queues like for kilometers just to get a butter or a lastia potato. There was a very pity situation a week ago when the ATMs were empty and the banks did not work, of course. So I couldn't even send any money. What was the reason for it? And the shelves were just empty. It's a little bit better right now because the local authorities made banks to work so they can get some cash. But when the businesses saw that the cash can be done, they started accepting cards also. And I can send some money, and I can understand that they can buy anything if there is anything on the shelves. Thanks to the fact that it's spring, some people started growing already vegetables, having few small harvests. So, and also, it's ridiculous to say there is no media there, right? But there is the smuggling of humanitarian aid because Russians do not allow the humanitarian aid in. So we try to smuggle some, and so people can buy something. It's a little bit, I think, calmer these days, but still, Russian army doesn't stop, and we just, every day wake up and figure out how many cities were shelter bombed at night, what's going on in the morning. And we still cannot count how many people died, but I know definitely it's about thousands. Mariupol is fully surrounded, but we know that several thousand people died there. Several thousand people died in Kharkiv. Also, all Donetsk and Lugansk region, which is Donbas region, it's like absolutely bombed out, blown up. They try to get to Kiev. They still try, and the recent today's announcement was that they really do, but they are unsuccessful right now. Ukrainian army is very strong, but Ukraine has got big support. It's first of all, this is the support from the world, but also, we have a culture of volunteering here since 2014 when Russia attacked us first. So people just reorganized very fast, and we're doing what is possible to do to provide any kind of relief. We are lack of different types of weaponry and protection, and we are afraid that Putin will move to another level. As we hear from intelligence sources, and as, for instance, the president of the USA was very outspoken of, all of this mention chemical weaponry. We are afraid that he can use chemical weaponry not only in the air, but also in the water. And we're afraid that they will try to do this not only in Kiev, because Kiev is the most secured place right now as the capital, so that they can do this in such cities as Kherson, in the region. He attacks regions very, very heavily. So this is a part of situation.
Perhaps you could give the audience a chance to make a question to you.
Yeah, please. It's better to have the dialogue that we talk.
Please, it's open to ask Julia some questions if you wish.
Yeah.
Nobody?
I think I just told something that was not new, right? You were reading and seeing it on TV.
Yeah, but
I have a question.
Yeah, please.
Yes. Hello, Julia. It's horrifying to hear your stories. and we've seen them on television and in the newspapers for a while now. How is the general mood around you? Is it hopeful? Is it we want to fight, or are people depressed and just want to
Annette, it's actually
lay down?
Yes, thank you. It's very hopeful. There are, of course, very depressed people and very shocked people, first of all, because many of them lost homes and all their life was canceled, right? This is shock, but this still many people have a lot of hope. And for you to say that for 2 or 3 days, my boyfriend is already at front lines. So after a month, he went to the front lines, and he believes that, you know, he will contribute to winning. And this is very important. It's heavy, it's hard, but he is a young guy, and he believes that, you know, he can do everything. But here, and I was traveling around and in Kyiv and on the streets, people understand that this is everything that they have. So they will stand to the very end. We don't have anything else to stand for. Oh. And I'm sure that you will do the same if they come to your home.
Peter?
I saw in CNN yesterday that there's a new phase for the Russian has lost 40% of their capacity, and many of the Russian soldiers have been beaten by your young men or elder men. What is the reason? Is it because the aid? We have sent 5,000 grenades from our country.
Yes, thank you. Grenades do not help when we are being bombed, and as I mentioned, that Russia has an air superiority, but definitely grenades are very helpful on the ground. All the help that was provided, and we are very grateful for this, all the help was very helpful here on the ground. Like, if Russians do not have air superiority, we will finish it much faster. First of all, they are lost on the ground. They don't understand where they are situated and how to move. Their maps are very old. They do not have connection. We cut off the connection. Yes. Second, they are very young guys. If you see them, if you follow, they're like 20, 21, 22, 23 years old, which means that Putin sent here the guys that do not have any other understanding of regime until except of Putin's. Young guys, no experience. They did not have enough fuel and food because they hoped to take Ukraine in 48 hours. They even had here cars that were decorated as for the victory. So they were really hoping to get us fast. And many of them, they are afraid. Like in Kherson region, they sit in the villages and they say, people, we don't want to kill you, like just because they have some humanity, they just don't want to kill civilians. They were told different legends that there would be some Nazi and they will need to fight Nazi, but they came here and say civilians, they don't want to kill civilians. And they say, but you need to understand we cannot come back, because they understand that they will be punished there. So they are lost, they're demoralized. And one of the facts that was proved, I was really looking for the proof, and it was proved by Western intelligence too, that some soldiers, I don't remember the region, they killed their own leader, like some commander, going through him on a tank. So it means that they are really demoralized. And this is very, very helpful. And we get really a lot of support also in terms of different equipment and military means and protection from abroad. We are not enough, to be frank. I cannot say we are enough, because I hear here or there, everywhere in the units, everywhere, and I'm in touch with the general staff that there is the problem with this. But I'm sure that if we did not have what we've got, we wouldn't be able to stand so long. That's why, of course, we understand that this support is absolutely enormously helpful. Also, there is this fact of sanctions. I was telling a month ago, I wonder if these soldiers would get their payment, would get their salary this month. And that's exactly what I've heard several days ago, that they have problems. They have shortage of money to pay the soldiers. If they do have shortage of money, then they cannot hire a lot of experienced good fighters like from Taliban or from Syria or from mercenaries from around the world, and they cannot pay their soldiers, the demoralization will be even more. So it will be more difficult for them to fight. So a lot of things are happening. The worst thing, what I would see in Russia, we can follow Russian social media just on Telegram channels, and Russia still develops this bacil of aggression and hatred to Ukraine, as if we have Nazi here everywhere. We see parts of Russian TV where the head of Russia Today says there are so many Nazi here, and they never thought so many of them are Nazi, etc., etc., etc. So it's very helpful. Thank you. The situation is poor from the point of view of a Russian soldier, but we have the hope, and you understand why. I'm sure that if we continue in such a way, we can finish it in a probably month or two. I hope so, and what general staff hopes to also.
I hope you can stay during the meeting, Julia, because we will have a lecture from speak from our Rotary Peace Center, one of our students here. And
what if I stand for 30 minutes more? Is it okay?
Yeah, you are most welcome, and I will
you.
give the word to our president, Annette. So thank you very much for joining us, Julia.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
happy
you
to see you.
Thank you very much for listening to Julia, and best of luck. I really wish you best of luck. Well, we continue with our ordinary program, and I leave the floor to Marijana. Please introduce yourself. Welcome to us.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to talk today. And I'm incredibly grateful to have the opportunity to listen into Julia as well. I'm very humbled by what you've shared and everything. It really hits close to home, everything that's happening, given my kind of shared experiences of the conflict. I will share my screen in just a little bit. Okay. So my question is to the facilitator of the meeting. Should I start with the presentation of the Rotary Peace Fellowship, since I believe that I already presented it to your group, or should I just go on to my research and what I've been doing in Uppsala for the past 2 years?
Well, I think you could proceed to what you're doing in Uppsala.
Okay.
I think that a lot of people here in the group is very familiar with Peace Fellow.
But I think you haven't had any presentation in our group.
In this group, then I will start from the beginning. So I have an opportunity or the privilege to present what the Rotary Peace Fellowship is. So the Rotary Peace Fellowship is a global program funded by Rotary International. It's a master's program and a professional development program. There are different peace centers around the world that basically act as hubs for peace and conflict researchers and development researchers. Uppsala is one of the locations, and belongs to the master's program kind of group of Rotary programs. And there are other 2 programs in Thailand and Uganda, which are professional development certificate programs. My understanding is that the purpose of these presentations is to incite more Swedish or local youth and young professionals at the beginning of their careers to apply for this program, with one kind of general rule that local students and local professionals cannot apply to the program at the Uppsala University. They have to apply elsewhere. So at the Department of Peace and Conflict Research, we study the dynamics of peace and conflict, and there are different current areas of research and study. The general areas of research are violence against civilians in armed conflict, peacekeeping, gender and conflict, strategic nonviolence, and climate change and conflict, which is my area of research and work. The fellowship program at the university itself is a master's in social sciences. And we study and examine the origins, the development, and resolution of armed conflicts in a more organized and in a scientific way. We first study the scientific approach, and then we take on the big research program, which I'm conducting right now, and apply all the scientific knowledge that we've gained and conduct our own research and study. We are also trained and specialized in different skills such as conflict management, peace building, and so on. Okay. So there are different fellowship components. The biggest and the longest one is the academic training itself, which is a 2-year program, the courses, the classes, and all the exams and everything. Then there is the applied field experience, which is also Rotary funded part of the initiative. And the aim of this applied field experience is to build knowledge and experience and to kind of gain practical skills on the ground. I personally conducted my applied field experience with a non-governmental organization in Nepal, dealing with disaster risk reduction, conflict affected communities. Next, we have different workshops and professional skills building opportunities and so on. And then we have networking with different peace academics and workers and Rotary members, such as these meetings. And the final component is the final seminar or the final presentation, which will be held in May, hopefully. And I'm really looking forward to that part. So as a Peace Fellow, I have a master's degree in disaster risk reduction. I've worked for 8 years with the United Nations Development Program on different programming, but I've been situated mostly in the Justice and Security Program and worked on demining and peace building. My current research interest and my ongoing research interest for the past several years is disaster risk reduction, specifically understanding the disaster risk reduction and conflict nexus in conflict affected communities, which kind of the aim of this is to bring conflict sensitivity approaches, DRR and climate change adaptation together. My AFE and my internship that I conducted from September to February this year have both been connected to this DRR conflict nexus. My AFA was the program in Nepal with the non-governmental organization, while the internship was conducted in Istanbul with the United Nations Development Program with the Bureau of Crisis Prevention and Recovery. And I worked mainly in Central Asia and Eastern Europe. So I will now kind of skip through the main components of my ongoing research and what I'm doing right now and why is it, and I will kind of emphasize why is this so important and why is it kind of crucial to think about DRR and conflict in the world with a growing number of climate-related events. So the aim of my research is to understand how and to what extent variations in conflict history and in conflict intensity have affected disaster preparedness in fragile and post-conflict communities. This could prove to be beneficial in several ways. I've identified three, since I'm kind of aiming for my research to be practical and applied afterwards. And I am definitely planning on continuing with my research and kind of research puzzle. I'm looking at conflict history and how it could be used as a predictor for weak disaster resilience during and directly after a natural disaster. Another kind of point of this research puzzle is that it could be used, conflict history could be used to put an emphasis on building disaster resilience in former conflict areas. And the third point is that development and humanitarian aid and disaster relief workers could be better prepared for disaster response if they have a clearer picture of conflict history and cooperation and coping capacities of communities that they're working in. So my general research puzzle is how does conflict history or conflict intensity, I'm studying both, affect the ability of communities to respond to and recover from disasters. I've adapted this from the general literature on disaster risk reduction, climate resilience, and conflict history. My my variable of cause is conflict history, and my variable of outcome is decreased disaster resilience. And basically the connection between the two, my assumption is, or kind of the established assumption is, the established kind of fact is that conflict history leads to decrease in conflict in DRR funding and programming. We'll see a destruction of vital infrastructures, which hamper disaster relief programming, evacuations, and so on. We have a generally competitive, uncoordinated international and development sector in post-conflict societies, and generally unreliable DRR institutions. Also, we have lack of basic disaster risk infrastructures and a disregard of conflict sensitivity approaches in DRR programming. And another important point that I've left out from this causal mechanism is the fact that research has shown actually that post-conflict societies are least likely to have implemented DRR institutional mechanisms and legal mechanisms for implementation of actual tangible DRR results. So this kind of, my logic, my research corresponds to the general established influences on the effects of civil war and development and disaster resilience, which I've adapted from several authors and sources. And one of it is that civil war substantially increased the exposure of communities to conditions that increase the risk of disasters. Civil wars reduced the pool of available resources for expenditures in disaster risk reduction, and civil wars constrained the level of resources allocated to the public DRR system in their aftermath. And these three kind of established statements that relate to my causal mechanisms is something that I aim to emphasize and kind of aim to continue to research in my future work. After I complete the program in June, I will continue working in DRR and conflict. And yeah, I'm looking forward to in May sharing the results of my research with everyone. And for now, I've decided to use the case study of Nepal to study the impact of conflict intensity on DRR. So thank you for listening, and I hope you now have a general understanding of what the Rotary Peace Fellowship is, and that you will kind of share this information and knowledge with some of the young professionals and students that you know who could apply for the program. And if you're interested in some other kind of things about interesting facts about DRR and conflict, feel free to ask questions. And I think we have delegated time for questions and answers right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And a big applause as well. Interesting to listen to you. And well, questions, please.
Can you explain what DRR, what that stands for?
DRR stands for disaster risk reduction. It's basically a set of institutional and infrastructural steps that are taken to reduce our exposure to different hazards, including technical disasters, so-called natural disasters, and so on. It's basically everything institutionally and physically that we do to reduce our vulnerability to them.
Okay, thank you.
More questions, please. Oh, I can't see any hand. Well, perhaps you've, I don't know if Julia is still with us. I thought that if there is more.
She went to work.
She went to work. Good. Well, thank you very much, Marijana. And it was, Anders. I can't hear you. You're muted. Please start again.
Yeah. When you're doing your field work, is that covered by the grant you get from Rotary also?
Yes, the field work, the applied field experience is also covered by the grant.
Very interesting. I think that what you're doing is tremendously interesting and very important. Hopefully you'll get a job in this field as well. It is a very tough area though, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
It is very, especially because in a lot of places this field is male dominated, which is another kind of conversation on DRR and engineering, because DRR experts are primarily engineers and security experts. And in a lot of places, especially in post-conflict and developing environments, these two fields are heavily dominated by men. So it's very, so my experience from Bosnia tells me that it's very difficult to kind of, I've only been taught by female professors of engineering, but I've never actually worked on DRR or GIS with a female professional, which is also interesting.
Peter, raise your hand.
Yes, thank you. It is very, very interesting to listen to you, Marijana. And I have the $1 million question. Why is peace so very difficult?
Well,
is it a matter about gender, as you say?
Well, it's a matter of a lot of things, but mostly about profit.
But nobody profits from a war, I think.
There are people who profit from war.
Yeah.
But they are very, very few. Most of us are losing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Anders och Kajsa.
Yes, Marijana, thank you very much. When you look at the conflict in Ukraine, with your perspective, having experienced the downfall of Yugoslavia and all the conflicts in following that. Are there, you think, some special perspectives that you have that we might not have?
Well, one important perspective is that the distribution and kind of the entire international field and humanitarian sector, and afterwards the development sector, have been very uncoordinated and disorganized in the Bosnian example and in the Yugoslav example. And this actually led to kind of fluctuations and variations which may have actually exacerbated and enhanced different inequalities within the country, since the international community was so uncoordinated in the post-conflict phase. So my kind of one point would be, and one hope would be, that there would be one organization or institution who would successfully coordinate the distribution of humanitarian aid in this conflict and immediate post-conflict phase, in order to reduce kind of the enhancement of future vulnerabilities and kind of potential inequalities between communities. For example, in 2015, we conducted a study and hired, I think, five or six consultants. We tried to locate all the money that was invested in peace building from 1995 to 2005. And this was absolutely impossible. We've reached 1 billion, we've managed to locate or to kind of identify $1 billion within our UN office, because this was with the residence coordinator's office within the UN in Bosnia. And beyond that, we couldn't kind of identify or locate all the funds that have been invested. So without actual coordination and without an organized approach to distribution and collection of data, we can't really make an impact. None of the organizations can make an impact. And this is exactly what happened in the Bosnian example. There was so little impact of all the funds that actually kind of went to the development sector and to the humanitarian sector, that it's actually appalling how much money actually went into the country and nothing actually happened.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. More questions? No, can't see any raised hand. Well, thank you once again, and a big applause.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's very interesting. And then, well, Julie, you raised your hand. I can see Julie.
Oh, thank you. No, that was to symbolize applause.
Oh, thank you. All right.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you. Well, ska vi gå över till svenska nu, och jag ska berätta lite grann om den här konserten som är tänkt att vara på måndag den 4 april. Och det är alla Rotary-föreningar här i Uppsala med omnejd som bidrar till att det blir en konsert, och det är Ulf Johansson Berre som håller i den. Och med kort varsel så visade det sig att aulan i universitetet var ledig, och det är därför som det drogs igång med ganska snabba ryck det här. Och det är Ulf som också har jagat ihop ett gäng som han är bekant med och trivs med, och det kommer naturligtvis att vara en framförallt jazzgenomgång, skulle jag kunna tänka mig att det är. Men vad vi har lovat då, det är ju att vår klubb ska bidra med 3 500 kronor för att bli då en grundplåt för själva arrangemanget. Så det kommer att bli förhoppningsvis annonsering i UNT, kanske till och med ett reportage i UNT. Det ska tryckas biljetter och det är lite sådana här kringarrangemang. Och de andra klubbarna bidrar då enligt en fördelningsnyckel som vi har kommit överens om. Så till exempel stora klubben bidrar med 10 000 kronor. Och den ekonomiska sidan är i hamn. Så jag tackar er alla som har satt in pengar, swishat pengar till mitt konto. Det är nog också så att vi har fått in dagsdato lite mer än de här 3 500. Och jag utgår ifrån att ni alla har tankar att det här ska komma till bidrag till Ukraina. Så att det kommer att skjutsas över till det här Ukraina-kontot. Och 40 000 behöver då Ulf för att köra själva konserten och sen kommer det att säljas biljetter. Och han hoppas att han kan fylla halva aulan, universitetsaulan. Och alla pengar kommer oavkortat att gå till insamling då för Ukraina och sannolikt via Röda Korset. Och som jag skrev också så är det ju så att det är någon kille som har jobbat i Peace Center som nu leder katastrofhjälpen i Ukraina. Jag vet inte om du Lotta vet vem det är eller Ulrika vet vem det är. JB någonting tror jag han heter.
Jag vet inte det, kanske Ulrika.
Ulrika, du har din mikrofon avstängd.
Man ska sköta sig hela tiden av och på. Ja, nej men han var här 13-15 tror jag. Och gruppen 13-15 och är du ledande inom Röda Korset och var här och fick ett universitetsstipendium för några år sedan och hade en föredrag. En otrolig kille skulle jag vilja säga. Så att de här studenterna som är här, de har ju verkligen foten inne i hela världen. Som rätt vad det är så är det någon en höjdare, om man nu ska använda det, som har varit med i det här programmet. Det känns stort att medverka i det.
Kul. Hans, du hör.
Ja, jag kom ju på alldeles för sent. Det var ju synd att jag inte hade den här bilden som bakgrund redan från början.
Ja.
Men i vilket fall som helst så ligger den på min Facebook, så vill ni använda solrosor mot blå himmel på era Facebook eller ja, vad ni nu vill, så är det bara att ladda ner den.
Tack, jättefin bild. Solrosor vet ni, det är ju Ukrainas nationalblomma, eller vad ska man säga?
Ja, det intressanta med solrosorna är läst att Ukraina är den största producenten och nu förstörs ju deras skördar. Näst störst producent och försäljare är Ryssland.
Ja, så kan det vara. Ja, det var, mina svärföräldrar är ju från Estland. Jag säger det är tur att de inte lever. För vad de tycker om ryssar, det har jag hört under många år. På något vis så fick alla deras fördomar fäste.
Jag har ju polska nära mig. Jag kan instämma i samma sak, Anne.
Ja. Nu ska jag ta och göra en dragning i vinlotteriet. Om det är någon av er som har något ni vill tillfoga så gör det nu medan jag går in och tittar här på vår konto.
Jag gör det, kan jag säga det, att jag stod bakom en ryss på 7-Eleven i Bangkok. Han kunde inte på något sätt betala för sig, så att sanktionerna funkar.
Nästa möte är väl fysiskt, vårt första fysiska.
Ja.
Och då träffas vi på Duvan.
Vad är den exakta adressen på Duvan?
Vad kan det vara? Dragabrunnsgatan.
Skicka ut den i alla fall.
Ja, jag skickar ut instruktioner för jag tror inte vi kan vara i Duvan första gången utan det blir den här andra alternativa lokalen. Helena, du vet vad den heter?
Ja, Otto, alltså i restaurangdelen som finns inne i Samariterhemmet så går man in liksom från gården, från den entrén som ligger inne på gården. Då har du restaurang Otto direkt till vänster.
Men jag skriver en beskrivning precis.
Jag gör det därför att jag ska ju ha Martin med mig så jag behöver beskriva för honom vad vi ska träffa.
Ja, för det är din adept som ska prata. Berätta mer. Slå ett slag för honom, Peter.
Ja. Det är Martin Värme, en uppfinnare. Han är svetsare och har kommit på, han och hans bror har kommit på en ny metod hur man reparerar i i fjärrvärmerör som gör att man spar både energi, tid och pengar i det här. Och honom kom jag i kontakt med för något år sedan när jag då var mentor på Nyföretagarcentrum. Numera är jag styrelseordförande i hans bolag och dessutom delägare i bolaget. Så kan det gå när man blir mentor. Man kan få en vän för livet nämligen.
Spännande.
Ja.
Vad roligt.
Ja. Lotta, ska vi säga något om ikväll innan jag kungör din lotterivinsten?
Ja, där lyckades jag. Ja, ni som är anmälda till konstrundan ska jag väl säga, med Gro, vi träffas på Missionskyrkan, Sankt Olofsgatan 40 tror jag det är, 18:00 för att titta på hennes verk som hon har gjort under temat närvaro. Och sen efter det så går vi ut och käkar en bit mat, dricker lite gott på Kitchen and Table där vi har bokat bord. Är det så man vill välja en annan aktivitet ikväll så har jag full förståelse för det, men hör av er till mig då, för då måste jag se hur vi ska göra med allting. Men ni andra, välkomna.
Tack, tack. Och då är vinnaren utav vinlotteriet Torbjörn. Grattis!
Ja, tackar igen. Vi låter den kostnaden återgå till stora summor.
Tack ska du ha. Tack, då snurrar vi den till Ukraina. All insamling som har varit fram till idag går ju till Ukraina. Och det kommer alltså att bli en konsert måndag den 4 april. Och jag skickar ut mer information för att det här är som sagt snabba ryck. Det är Ulf Johansson Värre och Dino Dunka som är de som är in charge för hela det här evenemanget. Det är kort varsel, jag är medveten om det, men det var faktiskt nästan, tror jag, enda möjligheten för att få till stånd det här. Och det är roligt att vi kunde enas om det med så kort varsel. Så att det är ingenting som har något gott med sig i det här sammanhanget. Jättetrevligt och stort tack Peter för att du fick Julia med oss också, Julia Mendel. Det var kul att få en direkt kontakt från Ukraina och jag förstår att de går igenom en tuff tid. Så att tacka henne stort för att hon var beredd att sätta av en hel del av sin tid här på morgonkanten.
Ja, och det visar ju på vilket fantastiskt nätverk Rotary är för oss.
Otroligt spännande och förskräcklig historia. Ja.
Att den personliga vänskapen som är ett av våra kärnvärden, att den finns så verkligt inom Rotary.
Ja, verkligen. And nice to see you, Shinatsu, that you're with us. I don't know if you're following us. Yes.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you to see you.
It was good.
How are you in Sweden? Is doing well?
Yes, I just finished my final exam yesterday, so today I will take a rest.
Aha, and up early in the morning one. All right. Nice to hear from you anyhow. Och tack så mycket allihopa att ni är här. Thank you very much for coming. And we see you soon again. Bye. Hej då.